This podcast is brought to you by Top, the stories of top companies. Disclaimer. This AI-generated content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Cloudflare, building the internet's infrastructure layer. The trading floor at the New York Stock Exchange hummed with anticipation on September 13, 2019. Matthew Prince, dressed in his signature hoodie beneath a blazer, Silicon Valley meets Wall Street, rang the opening bell as Cloudflare began trading under the ticker net. The stock, priced at $15 per share the night before, would surge 20% on its first day. But this wasn't just another tech IPO. This was the coming out party for a company that had quietly become the internet's invisible backbone, protecting and accelerating roughly 20% of the web's traffic, while most people had never heard its name. The story of Cloudflare is fundamentally a story about infrastructure, the unsexy, critical plumbing that makes the modern internet work. While consumer tech companies grabbed headlines and unicorn valuations, Cloudflare was busy building something more fundamental, a global network that could make any website faster, more secure, and more reliable. Their mission statement reads like something from a civic nonprofit: help build a better internet. Yet behind this earnest ambition lies one of the most sophisticated technical and business stories of the cloud era. Today, Cloudflare runs at a $1.88 billion revenue run rate, growing at 27% year over year with infrastructure spanning 330 cities worldwide. The company handles over 50 million HTTP requests per second and stops 209 billion cyber threats daily. These aren't just impressive numbers, they represent a fundamental shift in how the internet's architecture works. Every time you browse the web, there's a 1 in 5 chance your request flows through Cloudflare's network. But here's the central paradox. How did a spam tracking side project at law school transform into critical infrastructure that even the Fortune 500 depends on? How did 3 founders with no infrastructure experience build a network to rival companies that had spent decades and billions of dollars? And perhaps most intriguingly, how did they do it while giving away their core product for free? The answer lies not in a single brilliant insight, but in a series of counterintuitive decisions that compounded over 15 years. It's a story that begins improbably with a law student's curiosity about email spam.
Matthew Prince was not your typical University of Chicago law student. While his classmates were buried in case law, Prince was coding. In 2004, the CAN-SPAM Act had just passed, creating the first federal regulations around commercial email. Prince saw an opportunity, not for litigation, but for data. Together with his friend Lee Holloway, a brilliant but eccentric developer from California, they asked a simple question. Where does email spam actually come from? Their answer was Project Honeypot, a distributed system that created fake email addresses. Honeypots, scattered across websites to attract and track spammers. Think of it as a global network of decoy targets, each one recording who was harvesting email addresses and from where. Within months, they had thousands of websites participating, creating one of the most comprehensive maps of malicious internet activity ever assembled. The project was a side hustle, a curiosity. Prince continued through law school, even spending a year at Harvard Business School getting his MBA. Holloway kept coding from California, refining the system. They incorporated it as unspam technologies, more hobby than business. The data was fascinating. They could see patterns of attacks, identify bad actors, track the evolution of threats. But they had no idea what to do with it commercially. Then came the phone call that changed everything. In 2008, someone from the Department of Homeland Security reached out. Do you have any idea how valuable the data you have is? The official asked. Prince didn't, not really. But the conversation planted a seed. If spam tracking data was valuable to the government, what else could be built on top of this threat intelligence? Prince's background was eclectic, almost designed for this moment. Trinity College for undergrad, where he double majored in English and computer science, an unusual combination that would later manifest in Cloudflare's emphasis on both technical excellence and clear communication. University of Chicago Law School, where he learned to think in systems and precedents. Harvard Business School, where he was currently learning how to scale organizations and raise capital. By spring 2009, Prince was in his final semester at HBS, working on what would become Cloudflare with Lee Holloway and a new addition to the team, Michelle Zatlin. Zatlin was a fellow HBS student, Canadian, with a background in computer science from McGill and experience at Google and Toshiba. Where Prince was the visionary and Holloway the technical genius, Zatlin brought operational discipline and product sense. Their first business plan was submitted to Harvard's business plan competition. The pitch was audacious, democratize the tools that only big companies could afford. Content delivery networks, CDNs, like Akamai, charged enterprises hundreds of thousands of dollars. DDoS protection was similarly expensive. Cloudflare would offer both, plus security features starting at free. The judges were skeptical. How could you give away what others charged fortunes for? The answer lay in the architecture. Traditional CDNs cached content at the edge. Cloudflare would do that, but as a reverse proxy and sitting between users and websites, they could provide security and performance in a single pass. The honeypot data would inform threat detection. The network effects would be powerful. Every new customer would make the system smarter for everyone else. On July 26, 2009, Cloudflare was officially incorporated. The Dubilier Prize from Harvard's competition brought $50,000 in seed funding, enough to get started. Prince prepared to move to California, where Holloway was already working on the technical architecture. Zatlin would join them after graduation. They had a vision, a small amount of capital, and, most importantly, years of data about how the internet's threats actually worked. The foundation was set for what would become one of the most important infrastructure companies of the internet age.
That summer of 2009 in California had the frenetic energy of a startup creation myth in the making. Lee Holloway had rented a house in Santa Cruz, close enough to Silicon Valley for meetings, but far enough away to avoid distractions. Prince and Zatlin would drive down from San Francisco, and the three would code, debate, and architect deep into the night. Holloway, brilliant but prone to obsessive focus, would disappear into coding marathons that lasted days. Prince would emerge from these sessions to pitch investors. Zatlin kept them grounded, translating between Holloway's technical brilliance and Prince's grand visions. The technical challenge they faced seemed impossible. Could they build a system that added security without adding latency? The conventional wisdom said no. Security meant inspection. Inspection meant processing time. Processing time meant slower websites. But Holloway had an insight. If they controlled the entire path from user to website, they could optimize in ways traditional point solutions couldn't. They would build their own proxy software, their own routing logic, their own threat detection, all integrated into a single platform. By November 2009, they had enough to show investors. Ray Rothrock from Venrock and Carl Ledbetter from Pelion Venture Partners led a $2.1 million Series A. Rothrock, who had backed Checkpoint and other security companies, immediately grasped the vision. Security as a service delivered through the cloud was inevitable, but, he would later say, Cloudflare was just ahead of everyone else in seeing it. With funding secured, they could finally hire. But recruiting was a challenge. They were unknowns competing against Google, Facebook, and other giants for talent. Their solution was to target the overlooked, brilliant engineers at companies that were struggling or had been acquired. They pulled talent from Yahoo, then in decline, PayPal, post-eBay acquisition, and Mint.com, recently bought by Intuit. Each hire was personally recruited by one of the founders, sold not on salary but on the mission of building a better internet. The product strategy crystallized around a radical proposition. The free tier wouldn't be a trial or a crippled version. It would be the full product, minus a few advanced features. This wasn't freemium as the industry knew it. This was what Prince called democratization at scale. A blog with 10 visitors a month would get the same core protection as a site with millions. The business model logic was counterintuitive but brilliant. Most websites were small. By protecting them for free, Cloudflare would build the world's largest threat intelligence network. Every attack on a free customer would teach the system, making it better for paying customers. The free tier wasn't a cost center. It was R&D, marketing, and competitive moat all in one. By summer 2010, they had 1,000 beta users hammering the system. The infrastructure held. More importantly, the key metric they obsessed over, time to first byte, was actually improving for most sites. They weren't just adding security without slowing things down, they were making sites faster. It was time to launch. The plan was to debut at TechCrunch Disrupt on September 27, 2010. But Prince, ever the marketer, wanted more drama. In the weeks before launch, he reached out to journalists with a tantalizing proposition. Want to see something that will change how the internet works? He gave demos under NDA, building buzz. The message was consistent. This wasn't just another security company or CDN. This was infrastructure for the internet itself. The TechCrunch Disrupt presentation was quintessential Prince. Technical enough to establish credibility, simple enough for anyone to understand. He started with a live demo, pulling up a website, showing its load time, then enabling Cloudflare and watching it accelerate. Then he simulated an attack, showing how the same service that sped up the site also protected it. The audience was skeptical until he revealed the price. Free for most users, $20/month for pro features. Within 12 hours of launch, they had 1,000 signups. Within a week, 10,000. The servers, carefully architected by Holloway to handle load, stayed up. But this was just the beginning. They had proven the concept and attracted initial users. Now came the hard part. Building a global network that could compete with companies that had spent decades and billions of dollars on infrastructure. The CDN wars were about to begin.
6 months after launch, Cloudflare was handling traffic for 35,000 websites. The growth was exponential, doubling every few months, but it brought unexpected challenges. The company found itself at the center of the internet's most contentious debates about free speech, security, and the responsibilities of infrastructure providers. The traditional CDN market was dominated by Akamai, a company founded in 1998 with a market cap of over $10 billion. Akamai's model was enterprise-focused, long sales cycles, six-figure contracts, white-glove service. Cloudflare was the opposite, self-serve, instant activation, and radically transparent pricing. Where Akamai's website didn't even list prices, Cloudflare put them front and center. But the real disruption wasn't just price. It was the business model. Traditional CDNs charged by bandwidth. Use more, pay more. Cloudflare charged a flat rate. This seemed insane to industry veterans. How could you offer unlimited bandwidth for $200/month when others charged that for gigabytes? The answer lay in the architecture and incentives. By sitting in front of websites, Cloudflare could cache aggressively, block bad traffic before it consumed resources, and optimize delivery paths. They weren't just delivering content. They were reducing the amount that needed to be delivered. The strategy was working. By 2012, Cloudflare was powering 10% of the top million websites. But with scale came scrutiny. The company's commitment to protecting any legal website meant they found themselves defending controversial clients. When they protected WikiLeaks, they faced government pressure. When they protected forums for controversial speech, they faced public backlash. Prince's position was consistent. We're not the internet police. We provide infrastructure. This principled stance was tested dramatically in June 2012. Ugnaughty, a hacking group, used social engineering to compromise Prince's personal accounts. They called A-Hand, impersonated him, redirected his voicemail, then used password recovery to access his email and ultimately Cloudflare's systems. For a brief period, they redirected 4chan's DNS, replacing the site with their own message. It was a humbling moment. The security company had been hacked through its CEO's personal accounts. The response revealed Cloudflare's culture. Instead of covering up or minimizing, Prince published a detailed post-mortem, explaining exactly what happened and what they were changing. This radical transparency would become a hallmark. When they had outages, they published detailed explanations. When they made controversial decisions, they explained their reasoning. This built trust in a way that traditional corporate communications never could. The technical foundation during these years was primarily Lee Holloway's creation. He had designed a system called Railgun that compressed and accelerated dynamic content, something CDNs traditionally couldn't cache. He built the distributed key value store that powered their configuration. He architected the systems that could handle millions of requests per second. But by 2015, something was wrong. Holloway's behavior had become increasingly erratic. The intense focus that had been his superpower was becoming a liability. He would fixate on minor problems while ignoring major ones. His communication became fragmented. Initially, the team attributed it to stress or burnout, but the reality was far more tragic. Holloway was suffering from frontotemporal dementia, a degenerative brain disease. At just 36 years old, his brilliant mind was deteriorating. The diagnosis was devastating personally and challenging professionally. Holloway had been the technical visionary, the architect of systems that only he fully understood. As his condition worsened, the team scrambled to document and understand his work. Engineers would sit with him, trying to extract knowledge while he could still communicate. It was a race against time, preserving the intellectual foundation of the company before it was lost. By 2015, Holloway could no longer work. The company he had co-founded was growing rapidly, processing 5% of all internet requests. But he wouldn't be part of its future. Prince and Zatlin faced a critical moment. They had lost their technical co-founder, faced constant controversies about content moderation, and were competing against companies with 100 times their resources. Yet they had something powerful, a network that was becoming essential infrastructure for the internet. The platform era was about to begin.
Michelle Zatlin stood before the company all hands in early 2016 with a simple message. We're not a CDN company anymore. We're a platform. The room, now over 200 employees across offices in San Francisco, London, and Singapore, knew this was more than a positioning change. It was a fundamental shift in how Cloudflare would build, sell, and think about its business. The transformation had been brewing since Holloway's departure. Without their technical co-founder, the company had been forced to evolve its engineering culture. They hired John Graham Cumming, a renowned programmer and security researcher, as CTO. Graham Cumming brought a different style, more collaborative, more process-oriented, but equally brilliant. Under his leadership, Cloudflare began building products that went far beyond the original CDN and security offerings. The enterprise push was particularly challenging. Cloudflare had built its reputation on self-serve simplicity, but enterprise customers wanted sales representatives, custom contracts, and service-level agreements. The cultural tension was palpable. Early Cloudflare employees prided themselves on building products so good they didn't need salespeople. Now they were hiring enterprise sales teams, implementing Salesforce, and creating pricing tiers that went up to 6 figures annually. The numbers validated the strategy. In 2016, Cloudflare had 49 customers paying over $100,000 annually. By 2019, that number would grow to 408, a 70% compound annual growth rate. These weren't just bigger contracts, they were fundamentally different relationships. Enterprise customers wanted Cloudflare to replace multiple vendors, to become their comprehensive security and performance layer. But the path wasn't smooth. February 2017 brought the company's most serious technical crisis: Cloud Bleed. A bug in Cloudflare's HTML parser had been leaking sensitive data, passwords, cookies, authentication tokens, across different customers' sites. The bug had been active for months before discovery. In the worst-case scenario, sensitive data from one site could appear in the cached pages of another. The response was massive and immediate. Graham Cumming led a technical war room that worked around the clock to patch systems and purge caches. Prince handled communications, again choosing radical transparency. They published detailed technical postmortems, worked with search engines to scrub cached data, and notified all affected customers. The incident could have been company-ending. Instead, the transparent response actually strengthened customer trust. As one enterprise customer noted, "Everyone has incidents. Not everyone handles them like this." The content moderation challenges, however, were becoming existential. In August 2017, Cloudflare terminated service for the Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi website, after they claimed Cloudflare supported their ideology. Prince's blog post about the decision was tortured. "I woke up this morning in a bad mood and decided to kick them off the internet." He called his own decision dangerous, warning about the power of infrastructure companies to censor. The decision opened floodgates. Activists demanded they remove other sites. Governments pressured them to block content. The principled stance of neutrality was becoming untenable. In 2019, they would face the same decision with 8chan after the El Paso shooting. Again, they would terminate service, and again Prince would agonize publicly about the implications. Despite these controversies, or perhaps because of the thoughtful way they handled them, the business accelerated. The platform strategy was working. They launched Workers, allowing developers to run code at the edge. They introduced Access, turning Cloudflare into a zero-trust security provider. They built Teams, competing with corporate VPN providers. Each product built on the same global network, creating compound value. The fundraising trajectory reflected this momentum. After the initial $2.1 million Series A, they raised $20 million in 2011, $50 million in 2012, and kept climbing. By March 2019, they closed a $150 million Series E at a $3.1 billion valuation. The investors weren't just Silicon Valley VCs anymore. They included Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, and other public market investors. Everyone could see where this was heading. Inside the company, preparations for going public were intensive. They hired Thomas Seifert, former CFO of Symantec, to lead finance. They implemented public company controls and reporting. They cleaned up their cap table and stock options. But there was one special touch that only Cloudflare would do. They codenamed the IPO Project Holloway, honoring their co-founder who could no longer be with them. As the S-1 filing date approached, the company that had started as a spam tracking project was about to join the public markets with a story unlike any other infrastructure company.
The Morgan Stanley conference room on the 41st floor overlooked Manhattan as Matthew Prince fielded his 40th question of the day. It was September 2019, and Cloudflare was in the midst of its IPO roadshow. The banker had just asked about competitive differentiation, and Prince launched into what had become a practiced but passionate response. We're not selling bandwidth or storage, we're selling a better internet. The numbers in the S-1 filing told a compelling story. First half 2019 revenue hit $129.2 million, up 48% year over year. The company had maintained a stunning 51% compound annual growth rate from 2016 to 2018. But the metric that really caught investors' attention was net dollar retention, 112%. Once customers joined Cloudflare, they not only stayed, they expanded. Yet the profitability picture was complex. GAAP operating margin sat at negative 29%, with non-GAAP at negative 27%. The company was burning cash to grow, investing heavily in its network and R&D. Prince faced the same question in every meeting. When will you be profitable? His answer was consistent. We're playing for a much bigger opportunity than quarterly earnings. The roadshow revealed a fascinating dynamic. Consumer tech investors struggled to understand the infrastructure play. Enterprise software investors questioned the free tier. But infrastructure investors don't showed. Those who understood AWS, Akamai, and the guts of the internet got it immediately. One portfolio manager from Bailey Gifford put it simply, "You're building the roads. Everyone else is just driving on them." Behind the scenes, the IPO process was emotionally charged. The Project Holloway codename wasn't just symbolic. Lee Holloway's wife and family were granted special allocations in the offering. Early employees who had worked with Lee wore orange ribbons, his favorite color, during the NYSE bell ringing. Prince would later reveal that he video-called Holloway the night before the IPO, though Lee could no longer respond meaningfully. The pricing drama on September 12th was intense. The initial range had been $10.12 per share. Demand was strong but not overwhelming. Some investors worried about the losses. Others questioned whether a company giving away its product could maintain pricing power. The bankers pushed for $13. Prince wanted $15, believing it sent a message about confidence. After hours of debate, they settled on $15, the top of what anyone thought possible. September 13th, 2019, arrived gray and humid in New York. The Cloudflare team, over 100 employees, board members, and family, gathered at the NYSE at 4 a.m. for preparation. Prince, Zatlin, and Graham Cumming did live TV hits, explaining to CNBC and Bloomberg audiences what Cloudflare actually did. The challenge was constant. How do you explain infrastructure to a mainstream audience? At 9:30 a.m., Prince rang the bell. The first trade crossed at $18, a 20% pop. By day's end, net closed at $18.10, valuing the company at $5.5 billion. The financial media called it a successful but not spectacular debut. They missed the real story. Cloudflare had just become the first major infrastructure company to go public with a freemium model. They had proven you could build essential infrastructure while maintaining a mission-driven culture. The first earnings call as a public company came 6 weeks later. Prince opened with characteristic clarity. We believe we're building the control plane for the internet. Revenue grew 48% year over year. They added 114 large customers. The stock jumped 15% after hours. But Prince and Zatlin weren't focused on the stock price. They were already working on the next chapter. The transformation from security and performance to something much more ambitious, becoming the fourth major cloud provider just distributed across the entire internet rather than centralized in massive data centers.
The pandemic hit in March 2020, just 6 months after Cloudflare's IPO. While the world scrambled to adapt to remote work, Cloudflare found itself perfectly positioned for the moment. Their zero-trust products, barely a footnote in the IPO prospectus, suddenly became mission-critical as companies abandoned traditional perimeter security. Traffic through their network doubled in weeks as the entire internet shifted online. Michelle Zatlin's promotion to president in October 2020 marked a crucial evolution. While Prince remained the public face and visionary CEO, Zatlin took operational control. Her first major initiative was restructuring the sales organization around solutions rather than products. Instead of selling CDN, security, and compute separately, they would sell outcomes. Make your applications faster and safer, or protect your employees anywhere. The Zero Trust transformation was remarkable in its speed. In 2019, Cloudflare Access was an interesting experiment. Replace VPNs with identity-aware proxies. By 2024, their SASE, Secure Access Service Edge platform was competing head-to-head with Zscaler and Palo Alto networks. The key advantage was integration. While competitors stitched together acquired products, Cloudflare built everything on their unified network. A packet flowing through Cloudflare could be accelerated, inspected, authenticated, and routed without ever leaving their infrastructure. The network itself had grown to staggering proportions. 330 cities, processing over 50 million requests per second. But the real innovation was Workers, their edge computing platform. Launched in 2017, Workers let developers run JavaScript at the edge. By 2024, billions of requests daily ran through Workers. It was serverless computing, but distributed across the entire internet rather than in a few regions. The AI era brought new challenges and opportunities. As large language models proliferated, Cloudflare found itself in a unique position. They could see AI bots scraping the internet for training data. Their customers, content creators and publishers, wanted protection. In 2024, they launched AI Audit, allowing websites to control and monetize AI training access. It was classic Cloudflare, taking a controversial internet issue and building infrastructure to address it. The business metrics told the growth story. 2024 revenue hit $1.67 billion, maintaining 29% growth even at scale. More importantly, the customer composition was changing. While they still had millions of free users, the enterprise segment was exploding. Customers paying over $1 million annually grew 40% year over year. The largest customer paid over $15 million, unthinkable in the early days of $20/month plans. But perhaps the most significant strategic shift was the positioning against hyperscale clouds. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud had built massive centralized infrastructures. Cloudflare argued for a different architecture, distributed computing at the edge. Why backhaul traffic to a distant data center when you could process it milliseconds from the user? This wasn't just performance. It was physics. Light travels at finite speed, and Cloudflare was closer. The connectivity cloud positioning launched in 2024 crystallized this vision. They weren't trying to replace AWS. They were building the layer that connected everything. Clouds to clouds, clouds to users, users to applications. Every major enterprise was multi-cloud. Someone needed to be the neutral Switzerland that connected it all. With 20% of the internet's traffic flowing through their network, Cloudflare was already doing it. The technical achievements kept mounting. R2, their object storage service, undercut AWS S3 pricing by eliminating egress fees. D1, their distributed database, brought SQL to the edge. Queues, durable objects, and dozens of other services created a full development platform. Developers could build entire applications that ran everywhere simultaneously. Yet challenges remained. Competition intensified as Amazon CloudFront and Fastly fought for CDN share. The enterprise sales motion, while successful, was expensive. Sales and marketing consumed 48% of revenue. And the massive infrastructure investments meant free cash flow remained volatile, though finally positive in 2024. The question for investors wasn't whether Cloudflare would succeed. It was how big could they become while maintaining their mission-driven approach.
The CDN market in 2024 looks nothing like it did when Cloudflare launched. What was once Akamai's monopoly has fragmented into specialized players, hyperscale offerings, and Cloudflare's unique hybrid model. The numbers tell a stark story. Cloudflare processes 20% of all internet traffic, more than Amazon CloudFront and Akamai combined. Among websites using CDNs, 80.7% rely on Cloudflare. But raw market share doesn't capture the full competitive dynamic. Akamai, the original CDN giant, has watched its delivery segment decline for 17 consecutive quarters while pivoting to security and compute. Their enterprise relationships run deep. Fortune 500 companies have used Akamai for decades, but their architecture shows its age. Centralized points of presence made sense in 1998. In 2024's distributed world, Cloudflare's 330-city network provides better global coverage at lower cost. The hyperscale threat is more complex. Amazon CloudFront, Microsoft Azure CDN, and Google Cloud CDN bundle with their cloud platforms. The pitch is compelling. Why use a separate CDN when it's integrated with your infrastructure? But this integration is also their weakness. Cloudflare wins by being cloud neutral. Enterprises using multiple clouds, which is nearly all of them, need something that works across everything. Fastly, the perennial challenger, represents a different philosophy entirely. Where Cloudflare democratized CDN access, Fastly focused on developer control and real-time configurability. Fastly's modern network is built for efficiency, with high capacity, high throughput POPs that keep more in cache for longer, resulting in faster TTFB, lower latency, and lower cost. Fastly provides more custom configuration options than any other provider, allowing you to fine-tune CDN settings to optimize performance. Yet the market has rendered its verdict. In the year-to-date period, Cloudflare shares have climbed 9.5%, while shares of Fastly have plunged 26%. The competitive moat isn't just technical, it's economic. Building a global network requires massive capital investment. Each point of presence costs millions to establish and maintain. The interconnection agreements with ISPs take years to negotiate. The operational expertise to run infrastructure in 330 cities can't be hired overnight. This creates a powerful barrier to entry that protects incumbents. But Cloudflare's real competitive advantage is their business model innovation. By giving away the core product, they transformed customer acquisition economics. Their cost to acquire a free user is essentially zero. They sign up self-serve. Some percentage convert to paid tiers. The rest provide data, making the network smarter. It's a virtuous cycle that traditional competitors can't match without destroying their own economics. The small and medium business segment tells the clearest story. These customers can't afford enterprise CDNs but need professional features. Cloudflare owns this market completely. A startup can launch on the free tier, scale to millions of users, and gradually adopt paid features. By the time they're enterprise scale, switching costs, technical, operational, and cultural, are prohibitive. Enterprise competition is more nuanced. Akamai's relationships run deep. When a Fortune 500 CISO has relied on Akamai for 15 years, displacing them requires more than better technology. Cloudflare's approach is patient. Win the developers first, prove value with specific use cases, then expand. The $15 million customer they announced in 2024 likely started with a $50,000 pilot years earlier. The security convergence adds another dimension. As CDN and security merge into SASE platforms, pure-play CDN providers lose relevance. Cloudflare and Zscaler are the natural winners here, offering integrated platforms rather than point solutions. Akamai's acquisition of Guardicore and Linode shows they understand this shift, but organic integration beats bolted-on acquisitions. Looking forward, the competitive dynamics favor platforms over products. Customers want fewer vendors, not more. They want unified billing, support, and interfaces. Cloudflare's breadth, CDN, security, compute, storage, positions them as the infrastructure layer while competitors remain stuck in their original categories. The question isn't whether Cloudflare will maintain CDN leadership. It's how many adjacent markets they'll dominate using the same playbook.
The Cloudflare story offers a masterclass in building infrastructure businesses for the cloud era. Their playbook breaks conventional wisdom at every turn, yet the results speak for themselves. Understanding these lessons isn't just academic. It's essential for evaluating any infrastructure investment in the 2020 Lesson 1, Freemium at Infrastructure Scale. The decision to offer core infrastructure for free seemed financially suicidal. Infrastructure has real costs. Servers, bandwidth, power, cooling, staff. How could you give it away? The answer lay in rethinking the unit economics. Each free user might cost pennies per month to serve, but they provided value in 3 ways: threat intelligence data, word-of-mouth marketing, and future upgrade potential. The lifetime value calculation included not just direct revenue, but indirect network effects. This model only works at massive scale. You need millions of free users for the math to work. But once it does, it's unbeatable. Lesson 2. Radical transparency as trust currency prints as post-mortems after security incidents read like confessionals. Most companies would hire crisis PR firms to minimize and deflect. Cloudflare published technical details, admitted mistakes, and explained remediation plans. This transparency built trust in a way no marketing campaign could. Enterprise customers surprisingly valued this honesty. As one CISO noted, "I'd rather work with a vendor who admits problems than one who hides them." This transparency extended to pricing, product roadmaps, even strategic thinking. The blog became required reading for anyone in infrastructure. Lesson 3. Platform expansion through shared infrastructure. Every new Cloudflare product leverages the same global network. Workers runs on the same servers that cache content. Access uses the same points of presence that block DDoS attacks. This infrastructure reuse creates compound economics. The marginal cost of launching new products approaches 0. Compare this to competitors who need separate infrastructure for each product line. The lesson: if you're building infrastructure, design it to be extensible from day one. Lesson 4. Riding secular shifts. Cloudflare didn't create the cloud transition. They accelerated it. Every secular trend in technology, mobile, cloud, edge computing, zero trust, AI, expanded their addressable market. They positioned themselves as arms dealers in technology wars, essential regardless of who wins. When COVID accelerated digital transformation by 5 years, Cloudflare was ready. The lesson: position your infrastructure business to benefit from multiple futures, not just one. Lesson 5. Developer-first distribution enterprise software traditionally sold top-down. Convince the CIO, get budget approval, deploy everywhere. Cloudflare inverted this. Developers could sign up with a credit card, integrate in minutes, and prove value before asking for budget. By the time procurement got involved, Cloudflare was already embedded in production systems. This bottom-up adoption is faster, cheaper, and stickier than traditional enterprise sales. Lesson 6. Network effects in B. 2B consumer businesses talk constantly about network effects, but B2B infrastructure can have them too. Every website on Cloudflare makes the threat detection better for all others. Every developer using Workers creates tutorials and libraries that benefit the community. Every enterprise customer demands features that improve the platform for everyone. These network effects create compounding returns to scale. Lesson 7. Mission-driven culture at scale. Help build a better internet sounds like nonprofit rhetoric, not the mission of a public company. Yet this mission attracts talent that pure financial incentives can't. Engineers who could earn more at FAANG companies joined Cloudflare because they believe in democratizing infrastructure. This mission also guides difficult decisions. When choosing between profit and principle, the mission provides clarity. Lesson 8. Capital efficiency through architecture. Despite building global infrastructure, Cloudflare raised only $404 million before going public. Compare that to other infrastructure companies that raised billions. The difference was architectural choices. By using commodity hardware, optimizing software, and partnering with data centers rather than building their own, they achieved capital efficiency that seemed impossible. The lesson? In infrastructure, architecture decisions are financial decisions. The Cloudflare playbook won't work for every business. It requires patient capital, technical excellence, and the courage to give away value while trusting in long-term monetization. But for infrastructure businesses in the cloud era, it provides a template for building essential services that customers can't live without. The best infrastructure disappears. Users don't think about it because it just works. Cloudflare achieved this invisibility while building one of the most valuable positions in the modern internet.
The investment case for Cloudflare splits thoughtful investors into two camps, each armed with compelling data and legitimate concerns. Understanding both perspectives is crucial for anyone considering net as a long-term position. The bull case: infrastructure for the next internet. The optimists see Cloudflare as AWS for the edge, a platform that will power the next generation of internet applications. The Zacks consensus estimate for Net's 2025 revenues is pegged at $2.09 billion, indicating year-over-year growth of 25.4%. This growth rate at their scale is remarkable, especially considering they're maintaining it while expanding margins and approaching profitability. The total addressable market, TAM, expansion is perhaps the most compelling bull argument. What started as a $32 billion CDN and security market has expanded to include edge computing, zero trust, and AI infrastructure. Markets worth hundreds of billions combined. Cloudflare isn't just participating in these markets, they're defining them. Workers created the edge computing category. Their AI audit tools are establishing how AI training data gets managed. The platform dynamics create powerful lock-in. Once a customer uses Cloudflare for CDN, adding security is trivial. Once they're using security, adding Workers makes sense. Each product strengthens the others, creating compound value that point solutions can't match. The 112% net dollar retention rate proves this. Customers expand naturally over time. The secular tailwinds are undeniable. Every business is becoming a digital business. Cyber threats are escalating. Data sovereignty requirements are multiplying. Edge computing is moving from experiment to production. AI needs global infrastructure. Cloudflare benefits from all these trends simultaneously. They're not betting on one future. They're essential to multiple futures. The financial model is finally inflecting. After years of losses, free cash flow turned positive. Operating leverage is kicking in as revenue grows faster than expenses. The subscription model provides predictable revenue. As the business scales, margins should expand dramatically. The infrastructure is largely fixed cost, so incremental revenue drops straight to the bottom line. The bear case: priced for perfection in a competitive market. The skeptics see a company trading at 28.19x forward sales, a valuation that assumes flawless execution in an increasingly competitive market. For context, Microsoft trades at 13x sales, Google at 5x. Even high-growth SaaS companies rarely sustain these multiples. The market is pricing in not just success, but dominance. The profitability timeline remains uncertain. While non-GAAP earnings are positive, GAAP losses persist. The company continues to burn cash on infrastructure investments. Sales and marketing consumes 48% of revenue, unsustainable for a supposedly product-led growth company. The path to meaningful free cash flow margins could take years, and investors are increasingly impatient. Competition is intensifying from every direction. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud have unlimited resources and existing customer relationships. Akamai is transforming into a security company. Fastly, while struggling, remains a technical threat. New entrants backed by venture capital keep emerging. The moat, while real, isn't impenetrable. The enterprise transformation is expensive and culturally challenging. Cloudflare built its culture on self-serve simplicity. Now they're hiring enterprise salespeople, building professional services, and creating complex pricing models. This transformation often fails. Plenty of companies have died trying to move up market while maintaining their core business. Customer concentration is emerging as large enterprises become more important. The largest customer paying $15 million represents nearly 1% of revenue. As enterprise becomes a bigger percentage of revenue, Cloudflare becomes more vulnerable to lengthy sales cycles, procurement delays, and competitive RFPs, where relationships matter more than technology. The macro environment adds uncertainty. Technology spending is under pressure as companies optimize costs. The days of blank check digital transformation are over. CIOs are consolidating vendors, not adding new ones. Interest rates make growth less valuable relative to profitability. The market rotation from growth to value could persist for years. The synthesis. Execution risk at premium valuation. The truth likely lies between these extremes. Cloudflare has built something remarkable. Essential infrastructure with powerful network effects and platform dynamics. The secular trends are real, and they're positioned to capture them. But the valuation assumes perfect execution in an imperfect world. For long-term investors, the question isn't whether Cloudflare will succeed. They already have. It's whether they can grow into their valuation while maintaining their culture, expanding their platform, and fending off competition. The margin of safety is thin. Any stumble, a major outage, a security breach, a failed product launch, or a slower enterprise ramp could trigger a significant correction. The investment case ultimately depends on time horizon and risk tolerance. For those who believe the internet needs a neutral infrastructure layer and that Cloudflare will be that layer, the current valuation might seem reasonable for a decade-long hold. For those focused on near-term returns or worried about competition, the risk-reward seems less favorable. As with all infrastructure investments, the key is understanding not just the technology, but the business model dynamics that determine long-term value creation.
In the quiet moments between meetings, Matthew Prince sometimes video calls Lee Holloway. Lee can no longer respond meaningfully. Frontotemporal dementia has stolen his words, his movement, much of what made him Lee. But Prince talks anyway, updating his co-founder on the company they built together. The stock price, the new products, the technical challenges. It's a one-sided conversation that captures something profound about Cloudflare's journey. The company that exists today would likely surprise even its founders. What began as curiosity about spam has become critical infrastructure for 20% of the internet. The technical architecture Lee obsessively crafted in those early days, the distributed systems, the edge logic, the security layers, still powers billions of requests daily. His code runs in 330 cities, protecting and accelerating the digital world, even as he can no longer write a single line. The what-ifs are tantalizing. What if they had taken venture capital's advice and focused solely on enterprise from the start? They'd probably be a successful but unremarkable CDN, competing on features and price with Akamai and Fastly. The free tier that seemed crazy to investors became their greatest strategic advantage. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that make no sense to anyone else. What if they had maintained strict neutrality on content moderation? The principled stance of "we're not the internet police" was intellectually pure but practically untenable. The compromises they made, removing Daily Stormer, 8chan, and others, were agonizing but necessary. Infrastructure providers, they learned, can't be completely neutral. With great power comes impossible choices. What if Lee Holloway had remained healthy? This might be the most poignant question. Would Cloudflare have moved faster technically? Would they have built different products? Or did his departure, tragic as it was, force the company to evolve from depending on one brilliant mind to building a sustainable engineering culture? There's no answer, only the bittersweet reality that the company succeeded both because of Lee and in spite of losing him. The lessons for future infrastructure entrepreneurs are clear but challenging. First, infrastructure businesses can be built capital efficiently if you're willing to make radical architectural choices. Second, giving away value can create more value than capturing it, but only if you have the patience and capital to wait for the returns. Third, mission-driven cultures can compete with pure profit maximization, attracting talent and customers that financial incentives alone can't reach. Perhaps most importantly, Cloudflare proves that infrastructure doesn't have to be boring. Their blog posts read like technical thrillers. Their transparency reports spark industry debates. Their product launches generate genuine excitement. They've made internet plumbing interesting. No small feat in an industry that usually operates in obscurity. Looking forward, Cloudflare faces the challenge every successful infrastructure company encounters: the innovator's dilemma. Can they continue disrupting while defending? Can they maintain startup agility at enterprise scale? Can they keep their mission-driven culture as quarterly earnings pressure mounts? The answers will determine whether Cloudflare becomes the next Oracle, successful but soulless, or something rarer, a generational infrastructure company that maintains its founding ideals. The internet needs Cloudflare, or at least something like it. As digital becomes the default, as cyber threats escalate, as computation moves to the edge, neutral infrastructure becomes essential. Someone needs to be the Switzerland of the internet, trusted by all sides, beholden to none. Cloudflare has claimed that role, but keeping it requires constant vigilance against the forces that would compromise their neutrality for profit or politics. The story of Cloudflare is still being written. They're only 15 years old, young for an infrastructure company. AWS is 18, Akamai is 26. The internet itself is barely 40. The next chapter could see them become the fourth major cloud provider, or acquired by one of the existing three, or disrupted by a technology we can't yet imagine. But whatever happens, they've already achieved something remarkable. They've made the internet faster, safer, and more reliable for billions of people who don't even know their name. In the end, that might be the greatest success of all. The best infrastructure is invisible, working perfectly in the background while we live our digital lives. Every time you load a website instantly, every time a DDoS attack fails, every time your data stays secure, there's a chance Cloudflare made it possible. They helped build a better internet, just like they promised. The mission continues. This podcast is brought to you by Empor.top, the stories of top companies. Disclaimer: this AI-generated content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice.